3 years ago, he said I wasn't good enough for his family's wealth. He left me just days before our wedding for some trust fund princess his mother had chosen for him. Now I'm back in my hometown. And guess what? The richest and kindest man in the entire city just asked me to be his wife, right in front of my ex. Karma's beautiful, isn't it? If you have ever been underestimated, if you've ever been made to feel small because of who you are or where you come from, then this story is for you. Hit that like button if you believe in getting the last and most beautiful laugh, and subscribe, because we are serving up a story of justice that you will not want to miss. Now, let me tell you how I went from completely heartbroken to gloriously, very publicly victorious. My name is Tanya, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes God closes one door just so he can open the gates to a magnificent palace. But before I get to the palace, let me tell you about the beautiful gilded prison I once so foolishly thought was my home. I met Michael during my very first year working at a fast-paced downtown marketing firm. He was everything I thought I had ever wanted. He was tall, he was handsome, he was incredibly successful, and he had a way of making me laugh until my sides hurt. For 3 long and very beautiful years, we built what I had thought was the perfect and most unbreakable love story. He would bring me coffee every single morning. He would leave little, sweet, and very romantic notes in my purse. And he would tell me with a sincerity that I never, not for a single moment, doubted, that I was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. When he proposed on Christmas Eve, in front of my entire, tearfully happy family, I thought that I was living in a real-life fairy tale. Fairy tales don't prepare you for the moment you have to meet the evil stepmother. And honey, his mother, Patricia, something else entirely. The first time Michael took me to meet his parents at their massive, very intimidating mansion in the hills, I should have seen the writing on the wall. I had spent hours getting ready, choosing the perfect understated dress, making sure my hair was laid just right, had wanted them to love me, just as their son did. Patricia had opened the door with a smile so fake it could have been made of plastic. She had looked me up and down, a slow, clinical, and very insulting appraisal, as if I were something she needed to scrape off the bottom of her expensive designer shoes. "So," she had said, dragging my name out as if it tasted bitter in her mouth, "Your Tanya. Michael has told us so much about you." But the way she had said it, you would have thought that he had told her I had the plague. Robert. Michael's father was different, but he was not better. He was the kind of polite that cut so much deeper than any outright honest rudeness. He would shake my hand and ask me about my job, but his eyes would glaze over the very moment I started talking, as if my own simple words were not even worth the air they traveled on. Throughout the entire, agonizingly long dinner, Patricia had made her little cutting comments. "Oh, your hair is so... ... at. Interesting. Do you do it yourself?" When I had mentioned, with a quiet and very real pride, that my own mama had worked 2 jobs just to put me through college, she had said how... ... admirable. Not everyone, of course, has the same advantages in life. Every single word was a tiny, sharp, and very deliberate knife designed to remind me that I did not, and would never, belong in their perfect and very privileged world. And Michael. My Michael. The man who had promised to love and to protect me. He had just sat there, silently cutting his expensive steak, as if nothing at all was happening. When I would look at him, my own eyes a silent, desperate plea for his support, he would just give me these weak, pathetic, and very empty smiles, and he would change the subject. I kept thinking that he would defend me, that he would eventually tell his mother to respect the woman that he loved, but he never did. Those family dinners became a monthly and very painful torture session. Patricia would invite me with a smile that was as sweet and as poisonous as cyanide. And then she would spend the entire agonizing evening making me feel small, insignificant, and completely and utterly out of place. She would talk at length about the other very powerful families in their exclusive social circle, always making sure to mention how well-bred they were. She would discuss the high-profile charity events I had never heard of, the exotic and very expensive vacations to places I couldn't even pronounce. All the while, she would be watching me, her sharp, intelligent eyes tracking my every move. as I struggled to keep up with the conversations that were so clearly and so deliberately designed to exclude me. The worst part, the part that was a slow and very real poison to my own soul, wasn't Patricia's obvious and very brutal cruelty. It was watching the man I loved, my Michael, shrank into a small and very obedient little boy every single time his mother spoke. He would nod along with a weak and very pathetic smile when she would make her not-so-subtle comments about the importance of appropriate matches and of maintaining the family's high standards. When she would, with a casual and very pointed cruelty, suggest that he should be dating the more suitable girls from their own very exclusive social circle, he would just laugh, a small, nervous, and very uncomfortable sound, instead of shutting her down. One evening, about 6 months before our wedding, I overheard the conversation that would, in the end, change everything. I was looking for the bathroom when I heard my name through the heavy oak door of Michael's father's study. It was Patricia, her voice a low and very tearful sound of a pure and very theatrical maternal concern. "She will never fit into our world, Michael," she had sobbed. "Think about your children. Think about your career. Think about your reputation. Do you really want to spend the rest of your life having to explain yourself and your wife to everyone you meet?" I stood there in that long, dark hallway, holding my breath, my heart a frantic, trapped bird in my chest, waiting, praying for him to defend me, waiting for him to tell his mother that our love, that I, was not something that ever needed to be explained. Instead, I heard him sigh. It was a long, deep, and very exhausted sigh. The sigh of a man who was looking at me not as the love of his life, but as a problem, a very difficult problem he no longer knew how to solve. "I know, Mom." He had whispered, "I know." Those 3 simple words broke something inside of me that I didn't even know could break. And as his father, Robert, joined the conversation, his own voice a cool and very businesslike sound, talking about strategic choices and the advantages of a union with the senator's daughter. "Jennifer," I crept back to the living room, my heart pounding so hard I thought that everyone in that silent and now very dangerous house could hear it. When Michael came back into the room, he had kissed my cheek, as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just, in that one single and very final moment, agreed with his parents that I was not, and would never be, good enough for him. The pressure from his family, after that night, intensified. Patricia would call him daily, sometimes crying, sometimes screaming, about how I was going to ruin the family name. She would send him articles about the high divorce rates between couples from different backgrounds. She even had the audacity to suggest that maybe, just maybe, I was only with him for his money, knowing good and well that I had never, not once, asked him for a single, solitary dime, that I had insisted on paying my own way at every single possible chance I got. And Michael, my Michael, he started to pull away. The man who had once texted me, "Good morning, beautiful," every single solitary day, now began to forget to call. The man who had once planned elaborate surprise dates for us now started working late more and more often. And when I would try to bring up the wedding plans, he would get this distant, almost haunted look in his eyes, as if he were calculating the cost of everything, not in money, but in his own very precious social standing. 3 days before our wedding, he came to my apartment, looking as if he had just been hit by a truck. And I knew, before he had even opened his mouth. You know that feeling? The feeling you get when you know that your entire world is about to collapse? You can feel it in the air, long before the first single brick falls. The wedding was supposed to be the next Saturday. I had to make the calls. The humiliating and very painful calls. I had to return the beautiful and now very mocking gifts. I had to explain over and over again to my confused and very pitying friends and family why the man they had all watched love me for 3 long, beautiful years had suddenly, and with a breathtaking and very final cruelty, decided that I was not worth fighting for. My mama Gloria, a woman whose own quiet strength I had always taken for granted, held me while I cried until I had absolutely nothing left. "Baby girl," she had said, her own voice a soft and very powerful anchor as she stroked my hair, just like she did when I was a little girl. Their rejection of you is God's protection of you. You can't see it now. But someday you are going to thank the Lord that you did not tie yourself to a man who was too weak to choose you. But at that moment, I couldn't see past the pain. I fell into a depression so deep, so dark, that I could barely function. I lost my job because I couldn't focus on anything but the constant looping and very torturous reel of my own, very public humiliation. I moved back into my old childhood bedroom at 28 years old, feeling like a complete and utter failure. For months I lived in that thick, heavy fog of a profound heartbreak, and a new and very ugly self-doubt. Patricia's cruel, cutting words played on a relentless repeat in my mind. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe I was reaching too high. Maybe girls like me, girls from my world, were just supposed to settle for men who wouldn't have to choose between us and their powerful and very disapproving families. It was my mama who finally, with a great and very necessary act of a tough maternal love, snapped me out of it. She came into my room one morning, ripped open the heavy dark curtains I had kept closed for weeks, and sat on the edge of my bed. "Tanya Marie," she said, using my full name, the way she only did when I was in real serious trouble. "Are you going to let them break you? Is that it? That is not the daughter that I raised." Her voice, which had been so gentle just a few months before, was now a powerful and very righteous fire. "I worked 2 jobs and I put myself through night school so that you, my daughter, could have the opportunities that I never had. You think I did all of that so you could just waste away in this room over some weak, pathetic man and his racist and very unhappy mama?" Her words hit me like a splash of cold and very necessary water. She was right. I had let them convince me that I was the problem, when the real and very ugly problem was their own inability to see my worth. "You are going to get up," my mama continued, her own eyes now shining with a fierce, unwavering belief in me. "You are going to get dressed, and you are going to start building the life that you so richly and so completely deserve. And when you do," she finished, her voice now a quiet and very powerful promise, "you're going to show them all that their loss was your gain." That one single conversation changed everything. I started seeing a therapist to work through the very real trauma of being so publicly and so personally rejected. It's not just by Michael, but by the entire family I had tried so very, very hard to win over. I learned that their rejection of me said absolutely nothing about my own very real value as a person, and everything, absolutely everything, about their own very limited and very pathetic worldview. 6 months later, I made the decision to move to Atlanta. I needed a fresh start. Somewhere where no one knew my sad and very public story. Somewhere where I could rebuild myself from the ground up. My mama cried when I told her, but she understood. "You go show the world what I have always known," she had said, as she hugged me tight at the airport. "You are extraordinary, baby. Girl, don't you let anyone convince you otherwise. Ever again." Atlanta, with its beautiful, chaotic, and very unapologetic energy, embraced me in a way that my small and very judgmental hometown never could. I landed a position at one of the top and most innovative marketing firms in the city, working with a diverse and very brilliant group of clients who valued my creativity and my results over my family connections and my bloodlines. For the very first time in my entire professional life, I was being judged purely on my own and very real merit. And honey, I was soaring. Within a single, transformative year, I was leading the major national campaigns for some of the biggest brands in the country. I was bringing in new high-profile clients that had doubled my own new firm's revenue. I was making more money than I had ever, in my wildest, most ambitious dreams, ever imagined. I was living in a beautiful, sun-drenched apartment in the heart of Midtown, and I was building a new and very real circle of friends who celebrated my successes instead of quietly and with a petty and very real jealousy, questioning my worthiness. But the real transformation wasn't financial. It was internal. I had learned through a great deal of a very painful and very necessary therapy to love myself in the same unconditional way I'd been so desperately and so foolishly trying to get other people to love me. I invested in my own appearance, not to meet someone else's narrow and very suffocating standards, but because I, and I alone, deserved to feel beautiful. I took new classes, I traveled, I read books that expanded my mind and my soul. I became the woman I had always, deep down, been meant to be. Before I had allowed someone else's small and very limited limitations to dim my own very bright light. 2 years into my new and very beautiful Atlanta life, I decided to start my own consulting firm. I specialized in helping businesses to connect with new and often very overlooked diverse markets. I used my own unique experience to bridge the cultural gaps that the bigger and more traditional firms couldn't or wouldn't navigate. And within 6 short months, I was booked solid with a long and very impressive waiting list of clients who valued my unique perspective and my innovative and very effective strategies. It was at a charity gala for underprivileged youth that I met him. I was there representing one of my own new clients, feeling confident and very beautiful in a dress that had cost more than my old monthly rent, when this man had approached me during the silent auction. "Excuse me," he had said, and when I had turned around, I was looking into the kindest and most genuine eyes I had ever seen. "I couldn't help but notice," he had said, "that you just bid on the full 4-year scholarship fund. Are you involved in the world of education?" We had talked for 2 hours that night about everything and nothing except for what we did for work. He was passionate about giving kids from disadvantaged backgrounds the same and very real opportunities that their wealthier counterparts had. He had listened to my own ideas about mentorship programs and youth entrepreneurship with a genuine and very real interest, asking thoughtful, probing questions and building with a brilliant and very collaborative spirit on my own simple suggestions. When the evening had ended, he had asked for my number and I had given it to him, without any of the usual and very tedious games. There was something different about Xavier. A depth, a quiet, and very profound sincerity that had made me want to know more. Our first date was coffee, and it had lasted for 6 hours. We talked about our childhoods, our dreams, our values. He told me about growing up with a single, hard-working mother, a woman who had cleaned offices late at night just to pay for his school clothes. And I, in turn, had shared my own story about my own mama, a woman who had worked too, back-breaking jobs, and had still somehow found the time and the energy to help me with my homework every single night. It wasn't until our third date that I had finally, and with a great deal of a very real and very professional curiosity, learned who Xavier really was. Over the following months, Xavier and I built something beautiful together. It supported my business, celebrating every new client and milestone achievement. When I had doubts about expanding my firm, he encouraged me to take risks. When I succeeded, he was prouder than I was. He met my mama when she visited Atlanta, and watching them together made my heart full. He listened to her stories about raising me, asked her advice about surprising me, and treated her with the same respect he'd show any dignitary. Mama pulled me aside later and said, "Now, that's how a man should treat the woman he loves and the woman who raised her." Xavier never tried to change me or mold me into someone more suitable. He loved my natural hair, my loud laugh, my passion for social justice, my pride in where I came from. He didn't see my background as something to overcome. He saw it as part of what made me extraordinary. After a year of dating, he started talking about the future in ways that made my heart sing. Not like Michael, who made me feel like a burden to his plans, but like I was the key piece that would make everything else make sense. Which brings me to 3 weeks ago, when everything came full circle. My best friend since college, Rachel, was getting married back in my hometown. I'd been dreading going back, knowing there was a chance I'd run into Michael or his family. But Rachel was like a sister to me, and I couldn't miss her big day. Xavier offered to come with me, and I was grateful for the support. We flew in Friday evening and checked into the nicest hotel in town. Saturday morning, getting ready for the wedding. I felt nervous in a way I hadn't experienced since those early days in Atlanta. Walking into that wedding venue on Xavier's arm, I felt like a completely different person than the woman who'd left town broken and defeated. I wore a dress that cost more than some people's cars. But more importantly, I wore confidence like a crown. The wedding was beautiful, and I was genuinely happy for Rachel. But during the reception, my stomach dropped when I saw a familiar face. Across the room, Michael. He'd aged in the 3 years since I'd seen him, and not gracefully. He looked tired, worn down by something. Before I could figure out how to avoid him, he was walking toward our table. Xavier was getting us drinks from the bar, so I was alone when Michael approached. The irony was so thick, I could have cut it with a knife. Before I could respond, Xavier returned with our drinks. The contrast between the two men was striking. Michael looked desperate and diminished, while Xavier radiated quiet confidence and strength. I watched Michael's face change as the name registered. Everyone in the South knew Xavier Thompson. His company was constantly in the news, and his philanthropy work made him a local celebrity. The look on Michael's face was priceless. This was the same man who'd thought I wasn't good enough for his family's middle-tier wealth. And here I was with someone whose net worth made his family look like they were living paycheck to paycheck, then looking at me with something like desperation. He added, "Tanya, can I speak with you alone for just 1 minute?" Xavier looked at me, letting me decide. I nodded, and he kissed my cheek before walking toward the bar. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it, but we both knew it was exactly like that. "Michael," I said, my voice gentle but firm, "you made your choice 3 years ago. You chose your family's approval over our love. You chose social status over partnership. You chose the easy path over fighting for what mattered. I'm not angry about it anymore. I'm grateful. Grateful. If you had been strong enough to choose me, then I never would have become the woman I am now. I never would have learned my own worth. And I never would have met a man who sees my value without needing his family's permission to love me." As if summoned by my words, Xavier returned carrying a small velvet box that made my heart stop. "Actually," he said, looking at Michael before turning to me, "there's something I've been wanting to ask you, and I can't think of a better time." The entire reception seemed to pause as Xavier got down on one knee, right there in front of everyone, including the man who'd once deemed me unworthy of his family's acceptance. I looked down at this incredible man kneeling before me. Me, not just his love, but his whole heart. And then I looked at Michael standing there watching the life he could have had if he'd been brave enough to choose love over fear. The room erupted in applause as Xavier slipped the most beautiful ring I'd ever seen onto my finger. As he stood up and kissed me, I could see Michael backing away into the crowd, finally understanding what he'd lost. But the real vindication came when I spotted Patricia and Robert at a table across the room. They'd been watching the entire exchange with expressions of pure shock. Patricia, the woman who'd spent months convincing her son that I would never be good enough for their family, was staring at me like she was seeing a ghost. After the reception, Xavier and I were leaving the venue. Patricia approached us. Her smile was so forced it looked painful. "Tanya, dear," she said as if we were old friends, "you look absolutely radiant. Mr. Thompson, what an honor to meet you. I followed your company's success for years." I looked at this woman who'd made me feel worthless for months, who'd convinced her son to abandon me, and I felt nothing but pity for her. She'd taught her son to value the wrong things, and now they were both living with the consequences. As we walked away, Xavier squeezed my hand. The next morning, before we flew back to Atlanta, Mama came to the hotel to meet Xavier properly. Heard about the engagement from Rachel and wanted to give him what she called the talk. But instead of grilling him about his intentions, she just looked him in the eye and said, "You better know what you're getting. That girl right there is pure gold. She's got more love in her heart than most people know what to do with, but she's also got more strength than she even realizes. You treat her right, and she'll build an empire with you. You treat her wrong, and she'll build one without you." Xavier laughed and promised Mama that he planned to spend the rest of his life making sure I never forgot how precious I was. On the plane back to Atlanta, I thought about the woman I'd been 3 years ago. desperate for acceptance from people who were never going to see my worth. I thought about all the nights I'd cried myself to sleep, wondering what was wrong with me, why I wasn't enough. Now I know the truth. I was always enough, more than enough. I just needed to find someone brave enough to see it and strong enough to choose it, even when the world tried to tell him otherwise. Xavier and I are planning a wedding for next spring. Mama's helping with all the details, and she keeps reminding me that this time I'm marrying someone who chose me, not despite who I am, but because of who I am. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Michael had been brave enough to stand up to his family, if he'd chosen love over status. But then I look at the life Xavier and I are building together. A life built on mutual respect, shared values, and the kind of love that makes both people bigger rather than asking one person to shrink. I know everything happened exactly as it was supposed to. The girl who was deemed not good enough for one family's narrow standards became the woman who was everything another man had been searching for his whole life. The rejection that felt like the end of my story was actually just the beginning of a much better one. Sometimes the people who reject you are actually redirecting you to your real destiny. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to remember their worth. Subscribe for more stories of triumph over adversity. Remember, when the right person finds you, you'll understand why it never worked with anyone else. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had someone's family reject you? How did you overcome it? And remember, sometimes God closes one door just to open the gates to a palace. Your worth was never determined by someone else's ability to see it. Until next time, keep believing in your own value and never let anyone convince you to make yourself smaller for their comfort. The right person will love you at full size.